There were times that he vented, and he vented loudly. Why don't people just leave me alone?
But Michael trusted them with his life, with his kids, and with his secrets.
Have you gone out and actually watched the new Michael Jackson biopic, Michael, that just hit theaters in April 2026? The one directed by Antoine Fuqua and starring Jaafar Jackson as the King of Pop? Right now, this movie is straight up exploding at the box office. Biggest opening weekend any music biopic has ever had. Theaters are packed, fans are losing their minds over the Jackson 5 scenes, the moonwalk, the bad tour energy. Everybody's calling it a visual masterpiece. But at the same time, this film is sparking massive controversy. Critics are tearing it apart left and right, calling it a straight-up whitewash, a sanitized, family-approved version of Michael's life that conveniently skips over the darkest parts. While audiences are loving the music and the performances, a huge chunk of people online are furious about what got left on the cutting room floor. And here's the dirty little secret nobody in the theater is saying out loud. That perfect movie you just saw? It cost the studio an extra $10 to $15 million and 22 full days of emergency reshoots just to completely delete the entire third act that went deep into the 1993 child molestation allegations. There was a secret ironclad clause in the 1994 settlement with Jordan Chandler that legally forbids them from ever depicting or even mentioning him on screen. The Jackson estate found out too late, panicked, paid the millions, and forced the filmmakers to scrap the whole dark chapter and rewrite the ending. That's exactly why the movie stops cold in 1988. Right before the real storm hit. They handed you the shining legend, but buried the black legend. So today on Black Legend, I'm pulling the curtain all the way back. I'm giving you the top 10 darkest truths about Michael Jackson that the 2026 movie Michael deliberately hid from every single person who walked into that theater. If you've already seen the film, this one's gonna hit different. Stick with me. Let's get into it. Part 1. The 1993 Jordan Chandler Allegations. This is the exact chapter that forced the studio to drop $10 to $15 million and reshoot for 22 days straight. It all started innocently enough in May 1992. Michael Jackson's Rolls-Royce broke down on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. He pulled into a rental car shop owned by David Schwartz, the stepfather of a 12-year-old superfan named Jordy Chandler. Schwartz made a deal. Free rental, if Michael would just call his stepson. Michael, being the generous soul he always was, called the kid a few days later. That one phone call turned into late-night conversations, gifts, and eventually a real friendship with Jordan's mother, June Chandler. By February 1993, the whole Chandler family, Jordan, his mom June, and little sister, were flying to Neverland Ranch. They rode the Ferris wheel Michael built just for kids, watched movies in the private theater, and felt like they were living in a dream. In March 1993, Michael even flew the family to Las Vegas, where, according to later statements, he and 13-year-old Jordan shared the same bed while the rest of the family slept in another room. Then the storm hit. Jordan's biological father, Evan Chandler, a dentist who also wrote screenplays, had barely been in his son's life before this. But in May 1993, he finally met Michael. By July 1993, Evan was in the middle of a nasty custody battle with June. On July 16, 1993, Evan allegedly sedated his own son under the pretense of a dental procedure. And that's when Jordan supposedly confessed to being molested. Evan immediately called a psychiatrist, Dr. Mathis Abrams, even before Jordan said a word. On August 17, 1993, the LAPD opened a full criminal investigation. The police raided Neverland and Michael's condo. On December 20, 1993, Michael himself was subjected to one of the most humiliating moments of his life, a full-body strip search at Neverland Ranch. Detectives photographed every inch of his body, including his genitals, trying to match Jordan's detailed description. Michael always swore it was an extortion plot. He settled the civil lawsuit in January 1994 for around $23 million, but he never admitted guilt. He said he just wanted the nightmare to end so he could protect his family and keep making music for the world. In the original cut of the 2026 movie Michael, the entire third act dove headfirst into this exact nightmare. The raid, the strip search, the emotional breakdown of a man who once commanded the planet. Jaafar Jackson had already shot raw, devastating scenes. But the Jackson estate's lawyers discovered an ironclad clause in the 1994 settlement. Jordan Chandler and the entire incident could never be depicted or even mentioned in any film, ever. So they spent millions to erase it. They cut the whole dark chapter and forced the movie to stop in 1988. That decision didn't just change the ending, it changed how the world will remember the King of Pop. Part 2, the 2005 criminal trial with Gavin Arvizo. Now, imagine the man who once owned the world suddenly standing in handcuffs, and you'll feel the weight of what the movie refused to show. February 2003, Michael is still the biggest star alive, but the vultures are circling. British journalist Martin Bashir films the documentary Living with Michael Jackson. In one of the most infamous scenes ever broadcast, 13-year-old Gavin Arvizo, a boy who had survived cancer, is seen sitting on Michael's bed at Neverland, holding the king's hand, while Michael openly says he sometimes lets kids sleep in his bed because it's a beautiful thing. The public lost their minds. Gavin's mother, Janet Arvizo, and the family soon accused Michael of molesting Gavin between February 21st and March 12, 2003. They claimed Michael gave the boy alcohol, calling it Jesus juice, showed him pornography, and repeatedly molested him while the family was supposedly held captive at the ranch. On November 18, 2003, while Michael was in Las Vegas shooting the music video for One More Chance with his 3 children, 70 sheriff's deputies raided Neverland Ranch for the second time. They tore the place apart looking for evidence. 2 days later, on November 20, 2003, Michael Jackson was arrested, handcuffed, and forced to pose for that now iconic mugshot. The King of Pop looking broken, wearing a pajama top under his jacket. The criminal trial began February 28, 2005 in Santa Maria, California. It dragged on for 5 brutal months. 10 serious felony counts, child molestation, administering an intoxicating agent, and conspiracy. Every single day, the cameras were waiting. Michael showed up frail, sometimes in pajamas, sometimes with a surgical mask, clearly crumbling under the pressure. Neverland, the magical place he built for children, was dragged through the mud again. On June 13, 2005, after 32 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered the verdict, not guilty on all 14 counts.
The recent publicity about these settlements is unfair and damaging to him, his family, and his dedication to the world's children. The charges he faces are false and will be battled in a court of law within our justice system. He is innocent and will be vindicated.
Michael walked out a free man, but the trial had already destroyed him financially and emotionally. The man who once moonwalked across stadiums now looked like a ghost. Why didn't the 2026 biopic show any of this? Because the filmmakers were forced to cut the story off in 1988. The massive reshoots weren't just about 1993, they were about making sure the movie never had to face the full weight of what came after. They gave you the triumph. They left out the pain. Michael Jackson was a once-in-a-lifetime genius who gave everything to his art and to the children of the world. But the world kept coming after him with blades. These 2 storms didn't define his music, but they damn sure defined the last chapter of his life. Part 3, Leaving Neverland 2019. Here, a storm that the 2026 movie Michael chose to pretend never existed at all. In March 2019, the documentary Leaving Neverland hit the world like lightning. Two men, Wade Robson and James Safechuck, who had once been little boys under Michael Jackson's protective wing, stepped forward with raw, intimate stories that shook millions. They described how Michael had welcomed them into his life with open arms, treating them like family, letting them sleep in his bed at Neverland, traveling with him on tour, and showering them with love, gifts, and attention that felt like a dream. But according to them, that dream slowly turned dark, with years of alleged sexual abuse that left deep scars they carried into adulthood. The film was emotional, graphic, and impossible to ignore. It dropped at the height of the hashtag #MeToo movement and caused a global earthquake. Fans were torn apart. Some walked away heartbroken, others fiercely defended the man they loved. Even in 2026, the civil lawsuits tied to these accusations are still moving forward in court. Yet the biopic Michael never mentions leaving Neverland, Wade Robson, or James Safechuck, not even once. The film ends safely in 1988, long before these men became part of Michael's story, and the estate made sure the movie stayed far away from any controversy that could darken the celebration. This silence was deliberate. The movie wasn't trying to be a full biography. It was trying to give the world back the pure magic of the king of pop, the genius who made us feel alive. Michael always denied these kinds of accusations with every fiber of his being until the day he died. Whether you believe him or not, one thing is clear. The film chose to honor the light he gave us, not the shadows that still follow his name. And maybe that's exactly why so many people walked out of the theater feeling both moved and strangely incomplete. Part 4, Neverland Ranch, the dream that became a nightmare. Let's step inside the place that once felt like pure magic. Imagine rolling green hills stretching for miles, a grand French-style mansion glowing under golden California sunlight, a private train chugging through flower gardens, and laughter echoing from a full-blown amusement park, complete with a towering Ferris wheel and spinning teacups. That was Neverland Ranch, the sprawling 2,700-acre wonderland Michael Jackson bought in the late 80s and poured his heart into transforming. He didn't build it for himself. He created it as a sanctuary where sick kids, inner-city children, and anyone who never got to be young could finally feel free. Nights filled with movie marathons, carnival rides lit up until dawn, and children sleeping over in guest rooms while Michael played the role of the big brother he always wished he had. For him, this was more than a home. It was the childhood he lost on stage at age 6, rebuilt brick by brick. Yet the very same paradise soon turned into something darker in the public eye. When accusations surfaced, law enforcement swept through those magical grounds not once, but twice in major raids. Officers searched every corner of the mansion, the train station, the zoo where his beloved animals once roamed freely. The fairy tale kingdom Michael had designed as a safe escape suddenly became a crime scene under flashing lights and headlines. The man who had invited the world's children in now watched his private haven get torn apart in front of cameras. In the 2026 movie Michael, Neverland appears only as a beautiful backdrop, soft shots of the ranch during the triumphant years, nothing more. The filmmakers deliberately kept it that way. After the expensive emergency reshoots, any scenes showing the raids or the controversy surrounding the property were completely removed. The story stops right when the ranch was still just a fresh dream, long before it became a symbol of both wonder and suspicion. Here's the quiet tragedy. Neverland wasn't just real estate. It was Michael's attempt to heal his own wounded soul by giving others the joy he never fully experienced. The world saw a strange billionaire's playground. He saw a place where innocence could still exist. The movie showed you the fairy tale. It left out how that same dream later haunted him. Part 5, the extreme makeover, plastic surgery, vitiligo, and the man behind the mask. Legends. Now we step into one of the most private and painful transformations anyone in the spotlight has ever endured. Watch the evolution in your mind, the smooth, boyish face from the Jackson 5 days slowly sharpening through the 80s and beyond. A once broad nose becoming strikingly refined, cheekbones rising higher, skin tone shifting under bright stage lights. Michael always openly admitted to just 2 nose surgeries and a small chin adjustment. He spoke about it calmly on camera, explaining it as the result of a stage accident and personal choice. But the deeper truth involved something he didn't control, a diagnosis of vitiligo that began stealing patches of his natural pigment in the mid-80s. The autoimmune condition spread relentlessly, forcing him to use heavy makeup and prescription treatments just to face the world evenly. What the public saw was a dramatic change that fueled endless gossip columns and cruel jokes. What they missed was the quiet battle of a man already carrying the weight of childhood fame, family pressure, and constant scrutiny, now watching his own body change in ways that left him feeling exposed under every camera flash. The 2026 biopic only brushes past this chapter with quick, gentle glimpses during the peak fame years. You see the shift happen in soft focus, but the film never lingers. Why? Because the entire project was cut off early to avoid the heavier personal struggles that exploded later. The massive reshoots that erased the darker storylines also meant trimming any raw exploration of Michael's physical and emotional pain. They chose to show the icon in his prime, not the vulnerable artist quietly fighting to feel comfortable in his own skin. This part of his life reveals something profoundly human. Michael was a perfectionist who performed through physical discomfort most people couldn't imagine. The surgeries and the skin condition weren't about rejecting who he was. They were about surviving the unrelenting gaze of the world while still delivering the magic that made millions feel alive. The movie gave you the flawless superstar. It left out the man who was quietly breaking inside while still dancing like no one else ever could. Part 6. The pain that finally broke him, addiction, and the final night. Legends. Now we walk into the loneliest chapter of all, the one that still hurts to talk about. Picture the man who once lit up stadiums with a single glove and a moonwalk. By the late 2000s, that same man was lying in a darkened bedroom in a rented mansion in Holmby Hills, wide awake at night, begging for sleep that would never come. The world saw the king of pop. Inside, he was a man haunted by decades of physical pain from old injuries, endless performances, and the crushing weight of never truly feeling safe. To quiet the noise in his head and the ache in his body, Michael turned to powerful painkillers like Demerol. Over time, the need grew deeper. He called the strong surgical anesthetic propofol his milk, a heartbreaking nickname that showed how childlike his search for rest had become. On that quiet June morning in 2009, his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, administered a mix of sedatives and propofol through an IV line right there in the bedroom. Murray later said he stepped away for just a moment. When he returned, Michael wasn't breathing. Emergency crews rushed in, but it was too late. The official cause of death was acute propofol intoxication combined with other sedatives. Murray was eventually convicted of involuntary manslaughter, but that verdict could never bring back the voice that once changed the world. The 2026 movie Michael never reaches this chapter. It ends in 1988, long before the insomnia, the pain, and the desperate search for peace took over. The massive reshoots made sure the story stayed in the golden years of triumph, leaving out the final 2 decades where the king was quietly crumbling under pressures most people could never imagine. This one cuts deep. Michael gave everything, his childhood, his privacy, his body, so the world could have music that made us feel alive. Yet in the end, the very same world left him so alone that he had to pay a doctor to help him close his eyes at night. The man who danced like gravity didn't exist, died trying to find rest. That loneliness, that silent battle, is the part of the legend the movie chose not to show. And it leaves a hole in the heart of anyone who truly loved him. Part 7. Love, Fatherhood, and the marriages the world misunderstood. Legends. Let's talk about the part of Michael's life that the cameras loved to twist and the movie barely touched. After the storms of the mid-95, Michael longed for something real, a family of his own, a place where he could be more than the king of pop. In 1994, he married Lisa Marie Presley in a quiet ceremony far from the spotlight. Their union was intense, passionate, and short-lived. The world called it a publicity stunt to quiet the scandals. Lisa Marie later spoke fondly of him, saying she saw the gentle, wounded man behind the fame. They separated after less than 2 years, but the bond they shared stayed complicated and private. Then came Debbie Rowe, a nurse who had worked with his dermatologist. They married in late 1996 in Australia. This time the focus was different. Michael wanted children more than anything. Together they welcomed Prince in early 1997 and Paris in 1998. Michael was overjoyed, cutting the umbilical cords himself and rushing the newborn straight to Neverland. Later, in 2002, his youngest son, Biggie, once called Blanket, was born through a surrogate. Michael raised all three with fierce protectiveness, shielding them from the same spotlight that had stolen his own childhood. The 2026 biopic skips this chapter entirely. No mention of the marriages, the children, or the quiet joy Michael found in being a father. The film stops safely before any of these personal milestones, choosing to keep the story centered on the performer rather than the man who desperately wanted a normal family life. Here's what breaks my heart. Michael poured love into those children that the world had never given him. He was a devoted dad who built pillow forts, watched cartoons, and tried to create the warmth he missed growing up. Yet the public turned even his attempts at love into tabloid jokes. The movie gave you the superstar. It left out the father who was trying, with everything he had left, to build something real and lasting. In a life full of misunderstanding, this quiet chapter of fatherhood might have been his most human and most beautiful. Part 8. The Empire That Crumbled, Money, Debt, and the Fall from Grace. Legends. This next one shows how even the greatest success can leave a man standing on the edge. Michael Jackson sold hundreds of millions of albums. He owned one of the most valuable music catalogs on the planet, the ATV collection that included hundreds of Beatles classics. He once seemed untouchable, yet by the early 2000s, the numbers told a different story. Legal battles, massive lifestyle expenses, and the cost of maintaining Neverland drained him. Loans piled up. Banks began circling. Neverland itself came dangerously close to foreclosure. The man who had built a kingdom for children was quietly fighting to keep the lights on. He used his music catalog as collateral again and again, borrowing against the very empire he had so carefully built. The world watched and whispered that the king had lost his touch. What they didn't see was the pressure, the endless lawsuits, the tours canceled, the isolation that made every decision heavier. The 2026 movie never steps into this painful financial chapter. It ends long before the debt crisis, the near loss of Neverland, and the desperate attempts to stay afloat. The reshoots kept the story locked in the era of pure victory, never letting the audience see how the same genius who conquered the charts was later crushed under the weight of his own success. This one stings the most. Michael gave the world timeless music that still plays everywhere, yet he died carrying hundreds of millions in debt. The artist who created billions in value for others somehow couldn't hold on to his own peace of mind. It's a heartbreaking reminder that fame and fortune are two very different things. He built an empire with his talent, only to watch parts of it slip away under pressures no one around him could truly ease. The movie showed you the throne. It left out the man who was still fighting to keep it from crumbling beneath him. Part 9. The Heavy Price of Family, Blood Ties, Faith, and Heartbreak. You know, Michael Jackson grew up in a house that was never quiet. 9 siblings, 1 small home in Gary, Indiana, and a father who turned every waking hour into rehearsal. Joe Jackson's iron discipline gave the world the Jackson 5, and eventually the greatest solo artist of all time. His mother, Catherine, brought faith and warmth, raising them all as Jehovah's Witnesses with strict rules and deep spiritual roots. That family was Michael's first stage, his first audience, and for a long time, his only real shelter in a world that already treated him like a product. But the higher he rose, the heavier those same family ties became. When his groundbreaking Thriller video exploded with dark imagery and pure creativity, it clashed hard with the family's religious beliefs. Michael found himself torn between his unstoppable artistic vision and the faith that had shaped his entire childhood. Eventually, he made the painful choice to step away from the Jehovah's Witness congregation. That decision didn't just create distance. It opened quiet wounds inside the home he still loved. The expectations, the comparisons, the financial pressures, the constant pull from his father and siblings, all of it turned the very people who lifted him up into a source of deep emotional strain. In the 2026 movie Michael, we only see Joe Jackson as the tough driving force. The rest of the siblings and the religious conflicts are barely mentioned, almost erased. The film stops early on purpose, keeping the story in the safe glow of early success and never letting us feel how complicated and painful those family relationships truly were. This one really aches. Michael never stopped loving his family. They were the only ones who truly knew the little boy who sacrificed everything for the spotlight. Yet that same love became a cage he could never fully escape. The man who gave the world pure joy spent so much of his life quietly carrying the weight of their expectations while feeling misunderstood even by his own blood. The movie showed you the triumphant family story. It left out the quiet heartbreak of a genius who had to choose between his art and the people who raised him, and still carried the pain of that choice for the rest of his days. Part 10. The Strange Behavior and the Boy Who Never Grew Up. Have you ever watched some of Michael's more unusual moments and asked yourself what was really going on inside his heart? As the years passed, the world started seeing a side of Michael that felt stranger and stranger. He slept inside a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, hoping it might somehow slow down time. He tried to buy the bones of the Elephant Man. He wore surgical masks in public, carried umbrellas to hide from the sun, and surrounded himself with children's toys and mannequins even as a grown man. He built his own amusement parks and fairgrounds wherever he could, as if he were desperately trying to recreate the childhood that fame had stolen from him before he even learned how to ride a bike. People laughed. Tabloids called him eccentric, weird, out of touch. But if you look closer, those quirks weren't random. They were the visible scars of a boy who never got to be a child. A boy who was performing for screaming crowds at 5 years old while other kids were playing in the street. A man who spent his entire life trying to build the safe, magical world he was never allowed to have. The 2026 movie Michael barely touches any of these moments. Because the film deliberately ends in the late 80s, before these behaviors became more public and more misunderstood, the audience never sees this fragile, human side of the king of pop. The filmmakers chose the clean, heroic version of the legend, the brilliant artist at his absolute peak, and left behind the wounded boy who was still trying to heal in front of the entire world. This part breaks my heart the most. Instead of asking, why does a man who has everything still feel so empty and afraid, we turned his pain into jokes. Those strange habits weren't madness. They were a lonely genius trying, in the only ways he knew how, to hold on to the innocence that the world had taken from him too soon. He wasn't trying to be weird. He was trying to survive. He was trying to stay Peter Pan in a world that forced him to grow up before he was ready. The movie gave you the shining king. It left out the lonely child inside who never wanted to grow up, and who spent the rest of his life quietly searching for the childhood he lost. And that's it. Those are the 10 darkest truths the 2026 movie Michael chose not to show you. The hidden chapters, the pain, the controversy, and the complicated human being behind the king of pop. But here's the other side of the story. At the end of the day, this film wasn't made to expose every scar. It was made to remember Michael Jackson, to celebrate the genius, to let his music hit you in the chest again and bring back that pure magic we all felt when we first heard Thriller, Billie Jean, or Man in the Mirror. Sometimes we just want to walk into a theater, turn the lights down, and let the king take us back to a time when the world felt electric. We want to feel that childhood wonder again. And maybe, just maybe, we don't always need to see every single shadow to still honor the light he gave us. The movie had its hands tied by legal clauses, estate decisions, and the very real limits of what they were allowed to show. It's not perfect. But it was made with love, to remind a new generation why Michael Jackson will always be the greatest to ever do it. So tell me, what did you think after watching the movie? Did the film feel complete to you, or did something feel missing? Do you prefer the shining legend, or do you want the full, complicated truth? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this video helped you see Michael in a deeper way, please hit that like button, share it with other fans, and if you're not already part of the family, subscribe and turn on notifications. We go deep on these legends every single week. Thank you for watching, thank you for being here, and most importantly, thank you for still loving the King of Pop. I'll see you in the next one.